on page 248, the Chapter 8 quiz, the Unit 8 quiz. So the first thing, in North Carolina, a listing agent, D, is required by North Carolina license law to be written in formation, a listing agreement. A listing agreement, when they sign their listing agreement, there's no such thing as an oral listing agreement, okay? That has to be done in writing. A buyer's agency agreement can be done orally up until the time we want to write an offer and present that offer, okay? However, at the beginning of that oral buyer's agency, we have to get them to, we have to explain to them the Working with Real Estate Agents brochure. We have to talk about compensation, how they're going to pay, and we have to talk about dual agency. Okay, will they accept it or won't they accept it? Now, let's take a half a step back to the Working with Real Estate Agents disclosure that we've talked about a couple of times now. There is a line for them to sign it. And that is the perfect world. We want them to sign it. Can you force them to sign it? You can't force anybody to sign anything. But your name is on there, so you'll sign it and you'll date it. And then a little note would say, I gave it to Mr. and Mrs. Jones on this particular date. They refused to sign it. You cannot bludgeon them to get them to sign it. That is their choice. We're hoping that you'll explain it to them well enough so that they'll understand that it's just simply a disclosure and there's no obligation from signing that form. It just shows that you're doing the job, okay? But you can't make somebody sign it, all right? It's not a life or death thing. We want them to, okay? We want them to, but we can't make them. However, you do have to talk to them about compensation, and you do have to talk to them about dual agency, whether they'll accept it or not, dual and designated agency. Question number 2, page 248. How are an exclusive agency listing and an exclusive right to sell listing alike? All right. And the answer is C, the responsibility of representing the seller is given to one broker only. Don't forget the 3 types, right? You have an open listing, which means you have multiple agents, right? The only one's getting paid is the person who brings the buyer. And if the seller brings the buyer himself, nobody gets paid, right? Exclusive agency, just one broker. But if the seller retains the right to sell it himself, and if he sells it himself, nobody gets paid. And the one you're going to see pretty much all the time is an exclusive right to sell listing. And that exclusive right to sell listing means that regardless of who finds the buyer, the agency is going to get paid, okay, regardless. So those are the 3 different types of listing agreements. Number 3, all of the following would terminate a listing except, all right, the answer is C, okay? That's not going to terminate this listing, but let's talk about what will. All right, the expiration of the contract period. When that date is over, and there's a hard end date here, right? Unless we do an extension, there's no automatic renewal except in property management, okay? So at the end of that, it's over, listing over, buyer's agency over, okay? The death or incapacity of the seller. That's true, right? That's over. And the destruction of the improvements on the property. House burns to the ground. Hurricane knocks it off its pins. Anything like that. Government takes it for eminent domain, through eminent domain. Anything like that, and it's over. Your listing's over, okay? All of those things matter in that particular case. But non-payment of the commission by the seller, nope. That doesn't terminate your listing at all. It doesn't terminate your listing at all. Just while we're talking about this, letter B, the death or incapacity of the seller. What about the listing agent? If the listing agent dies, do we have do we still have a listing? Yeah, we sure do. Sure do. Because the listing's with the company. Now, the only time we would lose that is if I was a sole proprietor and I was doing business all by myself. So obviously, if I died, there wouldn't be any more my business would be gone, right? There wouldn't be anybody else. So if I was a sole proprietor and I died, well, then that terminates because the business would die, okay? But you got to understand that death is not an absolute. If the listing agent dies, somebody else goes in their place, keeps going. except when it's a sole proprietor. Okay, except when it's a sole proprietor. Then that means his whole business is gone. Okay, number 4, the parties to the listing contract are the sellers and the broker, right? That's who they hire, the broker. Number 5, a listing taken by a real estate broker belongs to the firm. They hire the firm. They hire the company. Okay. Number 6, a seller's residence is listed with a broker and the seller stipulates that she wants to receive $85,000 from the sale, but the broker can sell the property for as much as possible and keep the difference as the commission. The broker agrees. This is what type of listing? This is our net listing, okay? This is a net listing. This is not illegal by the course of law. It's just very much frowned upon, all right? There's a whole bunch of opportunity for deception, for fraud, for manipulation, for all of those things. So the answer to this is a net listing. That's when grandma says, give me 200,000 and you can keep the rest as your commission, whatever you sell it for. That's a slippery, slippery slope, all right? So try not to do that. Don't do that. Number 7, a real estate commission rate is set by the principal and the agent. These are negotiable. Okay, these are negotiable. All right, so the principal is the person doing the hiring, and the agent are going to get together and they're going to decide on what commission they're going to pay. Now, your firm may set a commission, and that's perfectly okay, but the principal doesn't have to accept it. The listing, the seller doesn't have to accept it. Okay. So everything is done through negotiation. There is no set commission rate, not overall community, your company. Number 8, in a sales transaction, which of the following statements is or are true of the listing agreement? Number 1, it must be in writing to be legal and enforceable. That's true. It has to be in writing to be legal and enforceable, right? And number 2, it requires the seller to sell the property if terms of an offer match the terms in the listing. It does not. Now, you may have earned your commission if they have come to an agreement and then something happens that the seller cannot conclude it. All right. So if you find a ready, willing, and able buyer with terms acceptable to the seller, then you have earned your money. But in this particular case, they're not required to sell even if the terms match. They're not required to sell yet, say yes. Number 9, a listing contract contains a clause that gives the broker the right to collect a commission after the listing contract terminates if the owner sells the property to someone the broker introduced to the property. What type of clause is this? This is our extender clause. This is a broker protection clause, right? This stops the seller or the buyer from firing us and then going around our back and us not getting paid after we've done all the work. All right. So that protects us after it ends, so that maybe it's, we used to use 90 days, but I've seen companies with 120, I've seen them with 180, whatever your company policy is, that is how long after your expiration that you'll be protected for somebody coming back to that you've already introduced to the property. Number 10, broker lists the property at an 8% commission rate. After the sale closed, the seller discovered that the broker has been listing similar properties at a 7% commission rate. Based on this information, which of the following statements is or are true? And the answer, number 1, brokers have violated antitrust laws. No, they have not. It's negotiable. Everything is different. There's no hard and fixed price. And number 2, the seller can cancel a listing agreement without penalty. That's not true either. They signed a document that says they're going to pay 8%. So neither one nor 2, okay? Neither 1 nor 2. Number 11, a broker gets a commission if her property Let's try it again. Number 11, a broker gets a commission if her listed property is sold, no matter who sells it. If she used what type of listing agreement? And that is our exclusive right to sell. That's the one you're going to see all the time. You may get one snuck in there. Like I said, I've been doing this since 2009 down here. I didn't see it when I had it back in 1996. I don't think it existed. But in this particular case, an exclusive right to sell is the only one I've ever seen. I've seen one exclusive agency in all the contracts that I've ever looked at. So, and like I said the Thursday night, I think that was by mistake. She grabbed the wrong one. Didn't really mean to do it. All right. So you're going to use probably the exclusive right to sell. Number 12. Under the North Carolina Residential Property Disclosure Act, the seller must, 1, provide a completed property disclosure form to the buyer before the buyer makes an offer. That's true. Now, if the buyer makes an offer and does not have this disclosure form, the seller has 3 days to get that to the buyer. But at any, it is caveat emptor, but at any point, the buyer can walk away without penalty. And then once they get that, they got 3 days to review it. Okay. Again, at any point, they can do it. Now, the seller can just have no representation all along it. And then that's up to the buyer, right? That's where your caveat emptor comes in. But possible that they decide to walk away or keep it. Depends on how much they want the house. And the second one, disclose all known property defects on the mandatory form. Seller doesn't have to say anything. Seller's agent, the listing agent does, but not the seller. Don't have to say a word. Number 13. Which of the following statements is not true about the North Carolina Residential Property Disclosure Act? All right. And the answer that's not true is if the seller marks no representation on the form, the agent is relieved of their duty to discover and disclose material facts. Couldn't be farther from the truth. You are still going to be held liable for anything that is a material fact on that property. So if you're doing the listing, you're going to have to make sure that you talk to your seller and know if there's any material defects with that house. All right. And the other ones are true, right? If the form is not provided per the statute, the buyer may be able to cancel any resulting contract. That's what we were just talking about. If we don't get it, he can walk away. Letter C, if the buyer rescinds the contract within the allowable time period, all deposit monies will be refunded to the buyer. Again, true. And D, act compliance is required of the seller, even if there is no real estate broker involved in the transaction. That sounds like a good question for a quiz. Does a for sale by owner need to fill out a residential property disclosure? Say yes, everybody. Yes, they do. Everybody, any kind of residential sales transaction. Okay. So it's a good way to, think of good way to try to trick somebody. Everybody has to do it. All right. New homes doesn't have to do it. Foreclosures don't have to do it. Rent to owns don't have to do it. That's it. Number 14. Which of the following transactions is exempt from the mineral oil and gas mandatory disclosure statement? All right, this is for built on improved properties only. You do not have to do it for vacant land. You don't have to do it for vacant land. Okay, they can perk the land, they can find out, they do all of those things. But if there is a house on there or there is any kind of construction on that land, you're not exempt. Number 15. What statement about listing contracts is false? Okay, is false. The answer is C. Real property is transferred when a listing agreement is signed by the seller. No, that's just, we're not transferring real property. We're just putting it up for sale, right? We're going to market it. That's what we're going to do there. So when we do this statement, a listing agreement is an employment contract rather than a real estate contract. That's true. It's an employment contract. And letter B, with a listing agreement, the broker firm is hired to represent the seller principal. We know that. And D, an agreement for brokerage services between a broker and the owner of real property must be in writing from the outset of the relationship. Okay. So this one, a listing has to be in writing from the beginning. Number 16, do not contact laws govern all the following areas except faxes, emails, postal mail. You can mail and send people anything you want. And from the shape of your own mailboxes, you can tell that people do that, right? You walk out there, does anybody get a letter from the postman other than a bill? I mean, that isn't junk. And even at that, I think I write one check a month. The rest is just all electronic transactions. So the postage, you know, thank God. Well, again, Amazon, those direct deliveries, things of that nature, your postal service is doing a lot of that now, doing more package delivery than they are important mail delivery. But you can, anybody can send you mail. Anybody can send you mail. And in some cases, that's the best way to do it, okay? The rest are all governed by do not contact laws. Number 17, placing a listing in the multiple listing system may be advantageous because these sellers have more marketing exposure for their property. If I put it in a multiple listing, doesn't everybody who's looking for something like that particular house, they get to see it, right? It's right there, all the details, all the pictures, all the facts, right? Certainly helps us, certainly helps us. Number 18, the responsibilities of the listing agent regarding the Residential Property and Owners Association disclosure include all of the following except we may not fill out the form for our client. We're not allowed to do that. We can tell them how, we can tell them what it's all about. We can tell them what the questions are going to be, right? And what answers we're looking for, like explain the question. If do you have a problem would be a yes answer. Do you not have a problem would be a no answer. A no representation would mean you either know or you don't wish to say. Okay, so we can explain that. We can explain the form. We can't fill it out for them. All right. So all of those things, right? You're not allowed to. All right. Number 19. Which statement is false regarding issues that must be discussed by a broker and a buyer before signing a buyer's agency agreement? All right. And the answer that's false is mineral oil and gas mandatory disclosure must be completed by the buyer. It's going to be completed by the seller, and when we find the house, we're going to get a copy of it. We'll sign it, but not until then. All right. The rest of these we're going to have to do. The licensee should explain the forms of agency available, which is our working with real estate agents brochure, and the party's rights and responsibilities under each type. The specific services provided to the buyer client should be clearly explained, and compensation issues must be discussed. All right. So dual agency we need to talk about, compensation issues we need to discuss, and the working with real estate agents disclosure we need to explain. Now, we would want them to sign it, but we can't force them to sign. Number 20. If a broker shows a property to a buyer consumer who chooses not to be represented by any type of buyer agency, after proper review by the broker of all agency choices in the working with real estate agents form, the buyer must, okay, and this question is from the old form, so we're going to disregard this, all right? So the answer would be D, have the broker indicate unrepresented buyer, seller, subagent on the form authorizing the broker to work as a seller subagent. It used to be on that old form, we used to have a little table, a panel we would rip off and have them allow us to be a seller subagent. Now, when it gets to that point, before we present that offer, we're going to have to ask them and get them to sign a form that says they'll allow us to be a seller subagent. But then we also need permission from the listing agent and the seller. All right, so 3 people have to give you that. If one of them says no, then you have to walk away from this transaction and let the buyer be an unrepresented seller or unrepresented buyer, sorry. So you have to be one of 3 things: listing agent, buyer's agent, seller subagent. Otherwise, you cannot complete the transaction. All right. There's no such thing as a transaction broker, no such thing as a facilitator, not in North Carolina. All right. We're getting close to the fun stuff. We'll be there in a minute. You got your pencils and your calculator out? Number 21. Which statement is false regarding oral buyer's agency relationship? All right. The answer is C for this question. All oral buyer's agency agreements must be exclusive. They are anything but exclusive, right? We can't stop them from working with anybody else, and we can't do it for a specific time frame. We can't make it finite. It's always infinite, all right? So what is true is a buyer, tenant, consumer may wish representation, but elect to postpone the execution of the written agency agreement. Very true, until we have to present an offer. Letter B, the oral agreement should address issues of compensation and whether the client authorizes dual agency if the situation arises, right? We've talked about that a couple of times now. And letter D, any oral agency agreement must be open-ended with no definite termination date. It's not in your best interest, but as long as you can get to work with the customer, client, and you can speak freely, you can advocate for them. Ultimately, you want them to sign that buyer's agency, get it into writing as soon as possible. Number 22, a buyer's agent must properly qualify the prospective buyer or client. Make sure they can afford what you're showing them. Make sure they got the money in the bank. Make sure the bank will lend them the money, okay? You have to qualify them. Don't waste your time. Your time is precious. Number 23, when a buyer broker has the opportunity to work with a limited service listing broker, the buyer's agent D should be very clear about expected compensation arrangements before entering a transaction. Now, this goes for both the buyer and the seller. Remember what we said about limited services listing brokers? Somebody's going to list a property and they're going to put a sign in the yard. They're going to put an MLS, and they're going to put it in the MLS. But the owner, for the most part, does all the transactions. They do the negotiating. But they may not offer the buyer or the buyer's agent a co-broke. They may not offer them any money. In which case, who's got to pay that? Your buyer, right? Your buyer. That's why that comes out there. So we have to be very, very clear about that, all right? How do we expect to get paid? So both from the seller, and if they say no, because we have no obligation to them, we got to go to the buyer. And we got to tell them, if you buy this particular house, you're going to have to pay an additional whatever we said we were going to charge. That's a must. That's a must. Number 24. Typical matters addressed in a buyer's agency agreement include the following: except, all right, except C, the broker's requirement to disclose the nature of the buyer's offers to other buyer clients. And let's talk about that for a second. Let's say I have 3 buyers that all have hired my firm, and I'm working with all 3, and they all want to buy the same house. Well, how do I handle that? Well, I handle it as if they are 3 independent people, but I can't share information between my 3 buyers. So buyer A, B, and C, if buyer C decides they're going to put an offer in on the house, I can't go tell buyer A and B. Okay, I can't give them the details of that. All right, so we're not allowed to cross-mingle information if we're doing that. We can handle it, we can do it. We can have 2 or 3 people that are interested in that particular property. I just can't give the other parties that information. Right? You can't tell them what they're offering. Price, terms, and motivation. I can't give them that. Yeah, no, you can tell them that. You just have to be very careful how you word it. So number 24, the type of property that the buyer is seeking should be in that buyer's agency agreement. Yes. Whether or not the brokers may disclose the name of the buyer. Sometimes our buyer doesn't want his name disclosed, right? They'll either buy it through a trust, or they might be semi-famous. And then at that particular point, they may want not to be disclosed. They might not think they're going to get a fair shake if they throw out their name there, right? And D, the need for the buyer to retain specialized assistance, okay? If they want a lawyer, they have to tell us who the lawyer is going to be. If they want a surveyor, anything like that, if they need inspections, sewage inspections, all of that stuff, they have to go get that specialized help. We don't do that. We are real estate agents, brokers. We sell and buy real estate. We know enough about the house, but we need professionals. We have professionals in this field, okay? Number 25. Broker Ginny is showing her buyer client William several properties one afternoon when William sees a property listed by Ginny's firm. Ginny should explain to William that B, Ginny's firm will act as a dual agent if he makes an offer on that property. Dual agency, simply the broker in charge. The broker in charge has both the buyer and the seller in the transaction. You as the agent may have that, and that's a strict dual agency. If it's two agents under the same umbrella, the broker in charge still has two, and each one of those will be designated dual agents, each one of those agents, designated dual agents, and they'll represent their client to the utmost, okay? If you are the only one that has both sides, you cannot favor one side or the other, all right? You can't give them obedience, loyalty, and disclosure, one side or the other. You have to be neutral. Number 26, all agency agreements for property owners must have a definite termination date. The only thing is C wrong because it says must. Must serve as the yes. And that's a good, Kimberly, I'm glad you brought that up. Be very, very careful about absolutes. If something might not, if something says it must, that means it's an absolute. That means that every single time this happens, that has to happen. It's the same thing with, I saw a question out there the other day that says that one of the answers was about sole proprietorships. Sole proprietorship said that what happens if the sole proprietor dies? Well, in that particular case, then we just talked about it, that the company dies. But one of the answers in there says that, well, if the sole proprietor dies, it's over because every time death is an excuse for termination. Well, not every time, right? Not every time. So be careful of how you read things, okay? Be careful of absolutes. Now, if something's an absolute, listing agreement must be in writing from inception. We know that. But if something is just an occurrence because of how, be very, very careful of absolutes. And that's one of those. It's the must word, all right? Must, will, every time, okay? Whatever that is, be very, very careful. Make sure you think those through. Okay, all right. Like in the next question, all agency agreements for property owners must have a definite termination date. That's true, they must, okay? Must. All right. So in that particular case, the absolute is true. In some cases, it's not. All right, math time. Math time, my folks. I'm hoping you've done these, so let's kind of do these. A seller assigned a listing agreement with a listing firm that authorizes the listing firm to collect a 6% commission. According to the company policy, the firm offers 40% of the total commission to any cooperating broker that sells the listing. If another firm sells the listing for $125,000, what commission amount will the listing firm retain? Okay. Well, we have to look at this in just really one way. So we're going to keep, as the listing firm, we're going to keep 60% of the commission, right? We're going to pay 40% to the other person. So when we're doing this, we're going to do a couple of things. 125,000 times 6%, all right? And that's going to give us 7,500. And we're going to keep 7,500. We're going to keep 60% times 0.60. Okay. And that means that the listing firm, again, keeps 4,500. Now, again, reading through this question, we talked a lot about the selling group and the cooperating broker, but watch this last sentence here. We want to know what the listing firm is. I'm willing to bet that if we go through that, we'll find 3,000, A. Wouldn't that be what the buyer would get? That would be what the buyer would get. Okay, so that answer is there. Very careful. All right, read the question. Number 28. A listing agent received $4,287.50 as her portion of the commission earned for the sale of her listing. She received 70% of the commission retained by the listing firm. The firm split the 5% commission equally with the selling firm. what was the sales price of the property? Okay. All right. So this might be a good part of for our magic T. 42.87 right? This is 70% of something. So we're going to divide this by 70%. So that means that 61.25 was what their company got for commission. So now they shared that, so we can either divide that by 50% or just multiply it for the total commission, which was $12,250. So if that's the total commission and that is 5% of something, then what can we do? Divide it by 5%, right? $245,000. This is the whole, this is a percent, and this is a partial up here. Okay, and this is a partial. So if I multiply the whole by a percent, it's going to give me that partial number up top. But if I divide this 12,250, but let's say the whole number, I'm going to get 5%. And if I divide this 12,250 by 5%, it's going to give me that whole number. So this magic T, we call it, just kind of works it around. So we're going to use it a lot. So you'll see how it's working. And that's what we did twice here. We knew that this is what she received, right? So as her commission. Well, that was 70% of some number, so we divided that and it came up to 61.25. If I take 61.25 and multiply it by 70%, which probably makes more sense, it's going to, if she's going to get 42.8750. So it all works together in a seamless round, if you will. Now, I'm showing you this way. If you can do it a different way, please don't let me stop you. The goal is to get to the right answer. This is way works for most people who have math phobia, if you will, all right? Because it's kind of simple. But if your way is better, have at it. Don't let me stop you. For those of you who are going to go back and redo these questions, there's an answer key in the back of your book. Go to the answer key. It's all broken out for you. It's all broken out. You can go see it. It's easy for you. Okay, number 29. Two firms split a 6% commission equally on a $73,000 home. The selling agent was paid 70% of his broker's share. The listing agent was paid 30% of her broker's share. How much did the listing agent receive? Okay, so the first thing we got is we have to find out how much commission we have. All right. So we have 73,000 times 6%, 0.06. All right. And that's going to be 43.80. Okay. That's going to be our gross commission. And we're going to split that. So we're going to divide that by 2. Okay. We're going to divide that by 2. And that means that each side is going to be 21.90. Okay. So we're concerned with how much the listing agent is going to receive here. We got to make sure we read the core, who we looking for, the listing agent, and they were paid 30% of their broker share. So now we know that 21.90 times 0.30, 30%, okay, is going to be $657. So again, take it in little bites, but don't forget what we're working for. Don't forget what we're working for. All right. 1533, that's answer C, would be the other person's share. Okay, so don't lose sight of the question is what I'm saying. Time to start getting critical with readings of the questions, all right? This is where the rubber hits the road here. Number 30. A house recently sold for $135,000 at a commission rate of 6.5%. The MLS received 5% of the commission as a listing fee. The broker got 40% of the commission, with 55% going to the selling broker. You, the selling agent, have an in-house split of 60% to you and 40% to your broker. What was your earned commission? Okay. It's very, very wordy. I understand that, but it's not as hard as you think. Not as hard as you think. All right. So rule number one is we got to find out how much money we're talking about. 135,000 times 0.065. That's our 6.5% commission. Right? 8,775. Now, of this 8,775, the MLS is getting 5%. The listing broker is getting 40%. Do we need to work that? Not really, because we know we're getting 55% of it, right? So not a big deal. We just say 87.75 times 0.05, our 5%, right? Or 0.055. All right, so 87.75 times 0.55, okay? And that means that our company is going to get 48.26.25. Okay, and now we're going to get 60% of that. 48.26 and 25 times 60%, 0.60. All right, and that's going to give us our 28.95.75. Okay. So we're going to find out what the commission is. Okay, we're going to find out what the commission is, and we're going to break it up. Somebody's going to get some, somebody's going to get the other. Some MLSs charges a fee. All right. Listing broker got 40%. Our company got 55%. We get 60% of the 55. And that's how we come up with our 28.95.75. Number 31. This is a tiered structure question, okay? It's not that difficult. You just have to do a little more simple math, really. Okay. A seller wishes to provide an incentive to his listing broker by offering this compensation structure. The broker will receive 5% on the first 100,000 of purchase price offered, 6% on the next 100,000 of purchase price offered, and 7% on any price above the first 200,000. If the seller receives an offer for 310,000 and accepts it, how much will the broker receive? All right. So here's what we have to do. It's not particularly crazy. Okay. So we know that 100,000 times 5%, 0.05, is going to equal what? $5,000. Okay. Now the second, see another 100,000 times 6%. And that's going to be $6,000. Now it's sold for 310. So that means we got another what? $110,000 that we have to pay 7% commission on. Everybody following so far? 110 1,000, right? Times 0.07. Right? And that's going to be 7,700. And then we're going to add them all up. 5,000 plus 6,000 plus 7,700. And that is going to give me my 18,700. Okay? Everybody good? All we did was break it up, right? All we did was break it up. So just take your time and read this through and think it through and just break it out like this. Last two. A seller needs $120,000 to pay off their mortgage loan and $1,000 for closing expenses. Plus, he would like to net $50,000 to use to purchase his next home. If the listing firm charges a 5% listing fee, what's the minimum sales price that will meet these requirements? All right, so we need a few things here, right? We need a few things. So how much money does this guy want after the closing? So we have 120,000 plus 1,000 for closing expenses, plus he wants wish money of $50,000. Okay, plus he wants wish money. Now, so that means that we need to clear after the closing, $171,000. Now, he's paying a 5% listing fee, right? So $171,000 is 95% of some number, because we have this. We have change this up a little bit. 171,000, and we have 5%, and we have 100%. So we can't get more than 100%. That's going to be our sales price, right? So if this is 100 and we're going to pay 5% commission, this has to be 95% of something. Let's go back to our T. Remember our T? You remember our T. 171,000 divided by 0.95. 0.95. If we divide it up, it should give us 180,000. Okay. If I just took 171,000 and multiplied it by 105%, it would not give me enough. I wouldn't have enough to give him the money he wants. I have to get a minimum of 180,000 in order to pay it off. Just remember that the commission comes off the total sales price. It does not come off what we got. Okay, it doesn't come off what he needs. It comes off the total sales price, what we're going to get. Number 33. Seller wants to net 85,000 cash from the sales transaction. The sales commission is 7%. The seller's closing costs are $1,000, and the seller's loan payoff figure is $65,000. What must the sales price be to accomplish the goal? All right, same exact thing. We have 85,000 that we want to get. All right, and we have 1,000 in closing costs, and we have wish money, if you will, of 65,000. That's what he wants, or that's his loan payoff. Sorry, that's his loan payoff. So we're going to add all those up, and that means that my seller needs $151,000 when he's done. So we list it up, 151. He's going to pay me a 7% commission on the total. The total is what? 100%. So therefore, this number is what? 93% of some number. 151,000 divided by 0.93 is going to come up to 162,366. I can promise you're going to get 2 or 3 questions that are going to be a lot like this one and the last one. It's key that you do that, because if you misprice your house, if you misprice this house and he still needs his $151,000, where's he going to get that money from? You. Going to cut your commission. So you got to price the house right. Right? Real world says he's going to get it out of somebody. And you'll be happy to give it to him, because if he doesn't make his goals, he's not going to close. And if you don't close, how much money do you make? You make anything, right?
If you like this video, feel free to share it with a friend. For more real estate education content, please subscribe to the channel. From all of us at Seacoast Real Estate Academy, thank you for watching.